Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Town Hall with Dreadton. He's currently running for Delegate of the North Pacific. I encourage everyone in the stage to ask questions about anything. So let's give a virtual round of applause to Dreadton and welcome. So, Dreadton, can you give me a brief history of yourself in the region and the positions you have held?
Glad to be here. I've held several positions. When I first started about 6 months in, I ran for speaker and got thoroughly stomped by Artemis. From there, I became a justice. I've ran for speaker again. I've been an election commissioner. I'm on the security council. I have been a deputy speaker, a prosecutor, and I'm currently a security counselor.
Oh, that is a lot of roles. So, why did you decide to run for the delegate this term?
I was actually planning on running next term, but I learned of Robes' decision to not seek re-election, and it moved up the timetable a bit. That, coupled with the changes that are being proposed, kind of pushed me into that direction. With past general elections, we have a tendency to mainly focus within the region, and we needed a coming term where we can start focusing on building our relationships outside of the region whilst adapting to what's getting ready to happen to the game as a whole.
All right. So, can you talk about the core points of your campaign?
Core points. I have a few plans. First thing I mentioned and I talked about was our stance on recruiting. TMP has been a passive recruiter, which means that we focus on nations that are just joining nation states with our welcome telegram, and we have an occasional telegram that goes out to nations that are on the retaliatory recruitment list. In a discussion I had with one of those regions that decided that they wanted to recruit within our regions against our policy was I asked them why they would do that knowing our stance on it and that we take action against that. And they told me directly in their telegram, TMP doesn't do anything about it. At most, you'll come and graffiti our WFE and we'll still be here recruiting. So there's never really been, outside of an automated occasional telegram, a punishment for violating our regional sovereignty as it comes to retaliatory recruitment. We're not set up that way. It's just the way our foreign affairs have focused over the years. As a GCR and as being as large as we are, we can't, or we can, but we choose not to have a bit of better relations with our allies and others that we wish to have a relationship with. And with the coming changes and the cut in the nation spawning, we can't keep that stance long term. And those discussions on what our new policy should be need to start before the changes go in place. The last thing we can afford to do is play catch up in this sort of arena when we're all competing to survive. Second point to that is our foreign affairs has an effect on how we're going to choose our recruit. If we target refounds, we have treaties with several sinker regions, and if we start targeting the nations they rely on, that's going to easily sour our relationship with them. So these foreign affair high-level talks have to start in order for us to succeed later on. The ministry side of the things internally, I've been looking at some of the programs we have, and Robes pointed out a few dispatches and stuff for old programs that we've done that's still active that we don't really keep up anymore. One of the things I noticed we stopped keeping up was the dispatch on radio shows, updating each radio show. Now, Mad Jack pointed out that he would like to update. That's actually something I think that we could probably archive. Our YouTube page does a really good job of keeping track of our videos. I just think it's a little bit more organization to it. So reviewing those programs and our labor cost involvement versus what they give us as a region is something we need to do. And then on the MPA side, well, we continue with the ministry side. Our recruitment and staffing has always been an issue. It's been an issue as long as I've been here. I'm sure it's been an issue before. And we always promise that we're going to make changes there. We do things to help improve, but we're starting to slack off on that again. One of the things I wanted to do was to change the narrative about radio. Radio has always been described as this highly technical, involved process, and it seems that way. With you take a look at OBS, the screen has all these different buttons. People don't know what they're doing. It's not that complex. It's just got a little bit of a learning curve, but once you learn, you can adapt and improve, and it becomes rather easy. And I think there's several areas with other ministries that kind of have that same feel of, sorry, my mic cut out there, has that feel of it's hard to get into, it might be a little bit complex, and just things that we need to look at and kind of evaluate. Another point, and one of the other key points in there, is the state of the MPA. There's been people expressing concerns about the amount of joint ops we do. We have had, Wes pointed out, we did a mini recruitment event. The last, I think, long-term recruitment project we had was the MPA General Series. And these are things that we need to look into. I spoke to a few people who are involved in the MPA at one point, or still involved in the MPA at others. And they've pointed out some areas that need improvement. One of the things that says some people found it a little bit complex to first join R&D. I've never been in R&D, so I rely on their expertise there. Wes pointed out in his question to me today that they've tried the Battle Buddy program, and I've reviewed his comments on that. But he stated that several people, telling you what you do at one time. A Battle Buddy, and at least the way it was, I would implement it, is the way I've learned about it when I was in the military, was a one-on-one mentor. And it doesn't necessarily mean this is mentor is part of you during op. It's that and more. You can have the Battle Buddy is the person who walks you through the basics of this. Hey, you do a little mini jump, not to topple anybody, but to show them what the process is, go over the terminologies and help anybody. There are some other concerns that were brought up that I can't disclose openly, but there's things elsewhere that we need to look at a high level.
You sort of covered your the shortage of staff. Do you have any ideas that come to mind, helping increase just the staff that we currently have? Because TNP as a region, we're currently experiencing shortage of staff and, helping ministries. There's usually only a few people doing all the work.
There is an overall drop in game players, and that hurts us. That hurts everybody. That and the visibility of what we do has dropped off a bit. I pointed out in my thread, we post our IFEs as a dispatch. We pin them. We post our Polaris articles as a dispatch. We mention it on the R&B. It's mentioned once. In a 24-hour period, if you've ever been in an R&V, there's several pages of conversation going on. So that post comes up and it's gone. What I'm planning on doing is having our game side advocates repost those things and bring those visibility to those programs, so those people who would be interested in running a culture event, writing an article for one of our 2 publications, or joining our recruitment team, actually see what we're doing and want to get involved. Secondly, hold on, mic's cutting out again. Secondly, Direct telegrams were a process I thought of, but they tend to cause much more frustration than they're worth. So my next step would be using, like the MPA week, using a culture week, discussing what culture does. Have a home affairs week, discussing what home affairs does. And this would be a process over the term. It's not 1 month, it's going to be ministry, and so on and so forth. Apologies for that. Where did y'all lose me at?
Oh, okay. It was a question from Robespierre. Um, so the first question he had was, what are your thoughts on the role of the Ministry of Home Affairs going forward? Have you been pleased with the minister's output this term as far as the lists go? And if so, what do you see as the next logical progression to that?
Home affairs, I've not been disappointed. I think their work speaks for itself. It's good engagement. Going forward, I see them also becoming our recruiters for our recruiting program in the future. Selling targeted telegrams, doing a little bit of research with FA on the regions that we're going to be targeting on the retaliatory recruitment list. Developing something that becomes an effective means of recruiting.
The next question that Robespierre had was, do you foresee any problems with staffing the Ministry of Defense's leadership going forward? As you'll know, the recruitment has been a big point of contingency for the organization, and people have openly talked about getting rid of the one org policy. What's your take on this, and any plans to alter the structure of the ministry in any way?
I currently don't have plans to restructure the Ministry of Defense. That is something that has to be discussed with those who have greater knowledge in the R&D. The one org policy, I've seen both arguments on it. I'm not going to go and change that policy. The one org policy it focuses MPA on the interest of the region, and outside influences can distract us and cause rifts within the functioning of the MPA. That's not an effective means of utilizing the MPA by introducing somebody whose loyalties are split. On that same note, there was discussions, I talked about this briefly at the beginning, about joint ops versus solo ops. The nature of R&D now, from an outsider's perspective, is organizations are working together to utilize their resources effectively. And as ideally would be the MPA functioning solo on every op, it's just not practical. And in the future, we should continue our joint ops and seeing where we can do those solo ops.
The third question from Robespierre. What can the Ministry of World Assembly Affairs do to better connect with their allies in World Assembly Legislative League? Obviously, we saw a series of World Assembly-wide telegrams this past week, and we saw blocks mobilizing. What do you believe WAL's place in this new World Assembly world?
Connecting with our allies in WAL. The joint dispatch that we saw for the quorum rating declaration, we saw its impact on the votes. And those kind of connections work for us, and it's something we need to grow. I've talked to a few people who are involved in WAL and who are involved in our World Assembly. And one of the things I want us to look into is having joint IAVs when practical. Another thing is possibly expanding the WAL with new membership. And Wall's place in the new WA world, it's going to become more important as you start seeing some of these new regions pop up with these new changes. So it's important that we continue to utilize this. We continue to work with them. We continue to function well with them.
Another question from Robespierre. What would you say is your strongest quality as a candidate? Conversely, what would you say is your most lackluster quality as a candidate? How would you mod this lackluster quality and accentuate your strongest quality? Let's talk about, sorry, that was the other question.
My most lackluster quality, I think my shortcomings is probably going to be within the realm of foreign affairs. That's never been area of the game that I've had a lot of focus. I've been on the staff. I've seen the way it works. So mitigating those, I have a. I've reached out to somebody I think who's one of the strongest foreign affairs people we have, and I would utilize their knowledge to shore up those two weak points. My strongest quality would be my willingness to take risk and be willing to say, hey, this program I started, it's not working out. We're going to need to drop it. Sorry, I got Katrina cough. So my strongest quality would be the willingness to take risks, the willingness to try out new things and new ways of thinking, and the willingness to say, hey, this isn't going to be working out.
All right, another question from Robespierre. Let's talk about your opponent for a minute. What's something that you say a Dreadton administration would do better than a Matt Jeg administration?
Sorry, the infrastructure down here has been taking a few hits. My administration would probably adapt a little better than Magic's, in my opinion. Magic has more experience, and he's got his ways of thinking that are unique. But he's focused on achieving his goal, and sometimes that hyper focus doesn't allow for adaptability.
Like what? Oh, likewise, what would a Mad Jack administration do better than a Dreadton administration in your mind?
What would Magic do better than a Dreadton administration? Magic would be able to hit the ground running faster than I can. My current role is within the judicial branch. Magic is currently in the executive, and he already has an idea and foreknowledge of what the current administration's plans are that haven't been publicly announced.
Another question from Robespierre. Plans for End Day. Are you a big potato guy, or would you like to see TMP head off in a different direction this year?
Am I a potato guy? I love French fries. Um, but for end day, you kind of have to be part of an alliance in some way in order to rank up in the top. And I like to win. The region likes to win. So I could see us going back in with potato. But it would be nice for us to once again, take that leadership role. I believe my first end day, we were in a uppercut, and we won the year before, so there was a big focus by the Four Horsemen to knock us down, and from then we switched to the potato, and we won again. So that winning It's exciting and fun. So I would say, potato guy.
Gotta authorize everything. As currently the longest current active member of the NPA, coming into the NPA the beginning of Raven's administration decades ago, after 8 years of joint ops as leader of the SPSF. One of the things that happens over time in a game and use of things in the whole 9 yards, I strongly have the thought process and belief that the reason that the single army strategy is implied in the NPA is that the NPA is not an independent force that goes out doing its own thing. The NPA is specifically a delegate's tool and has to be available to do what the delegate needs at any given time. The operation security of having people in 3 different organizations and I can't play with the NPA today because I'm piling with somebody else just doesn't work. So, I get it. I mean, you can always, we don't have any problem with you going to play in a night with another organization. You just can't be a member of it. You can't commit to it. You have to be available when the NPA needs you. So it is what it is. Did that come across?
Yep, I got you. Let me respond to that. I'm gonna move you back. Let me respond to that. I understand, and I think I agree with that. Look what happened with TEP, XKI, and the Blackhawks. We have a person who is in multiple organizations, and that caused a big disruption. XKI and the rest were able to use that to beat on somebody. And that's the same kind of line of thought I have with the one organization policy. If you have somebody who split loyalties between, well, I say loyalties, but split between 2 different groups, and their primary focus is with TSP and we have a split, or with XKI and they have a choice, I can either keep NPA's information quiet or leak it to XKI and let them respond quicker. That's not always in our best interest. And as the NPA and our independence, and the way we run our R&D, the NPA needs to be there to ensure our interest, to help promote our interest, to support our allies. And if we have somebody torn between multiple regions, that reliability isn't there.
Question from Paleth. Dreadton, this is the second time you got on the court and are running for something else. Explain.
It is. The first time was right after I became a deputy speaker for Artemis, and I left in the middle of the term to become justice, and then I ran for speaker. And that was just an experience. This time I wasn't planning on running. I went to the EC with the clear intentions of not running this term for this. But like I said earlier on, with Robes, I expected him to run 2 terms, but his real life came into play and he chose not to. So that moved up my timetable. These changes accelerated what I wanted to do, and they accelerated what I wanted to do, and we need to start responding to these now versus waiting another term. So it's bad. I'm leaving the court running before my project in the court's completed, but that project can wait. We need to start making some changes now. In the let me guess, lost me again.
Yes.
Did we get the whole thing out? All right,
Now,
let me go back. The first time I ran after being a deputy speaker for about 3 months with Artemis. That was inexperience. This time, it's more of an acceleration of existing plans. I did not intend to run this term. Robe's decision to not run and these gameplay changes coming out over the last few months accelerated the timetable. I didn't want another run-of-the-mill term where we sort of continue on the same path. There's decisions that we have to start discussing now. Somebody pointed out that these changes are not going to happen this term, and that's likely possible. But if we don't have the discussions now, we are going to be playing catch up to the end. So to Bob's question, to the question about whether I think Bob's question, what's big difference? I answered that question, Bob. What's my biggest advantage?
okay, let's move on to Rube's questions. Do you believe the situation down south will affect your availability if elected delegate?
Right now, no. Things should be stabilized by Thursday. Electricity in New Orleans is in almost fully restored, and the internet service should be up and running 2 days after. So that backbone node that my service also relies on should be up and running. Plus, I have an employer who's pretty liberal with their internet usage, and I can always piggyback off of his dedicated emergency line. So,
A question from Ghost. It seems like you wanted to emphasize the response to upcoming game changes as a key point of your platform. Do you feel you have that covered better than your opponent?
yes, it's. Yes, I do think I have that better covered than my opponent. Magic's main focus has been on, at least from the outside, from perusing his thread, has been on relationship building and problems with our tools that I disagree are problems. Relationship building is key for the next thing, but we have to do more than that. There's a bunch of long-standing policies that we do have to look at.
Bob asks, are you a real villain?
No, but I play one on TV.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Bob? Write it down if you can. So Koopa, and the NPA does not currently have a high volume of active members. How do you think this will affect your plans for North Pacific Army recruitment and the rebuilding of the Army, as you tend to need an army to build an army? Oh, is that a question?
Yeah. Membership. Koopa's right. You do need an army to build an army. It can affect our plans. We have to time it correctly. We have to ensure that we have a sufficient ops plan that we're capable of doing to promote. I wanted to promote those on an MPA week. So it's a matter of scheduling, which can be a little bit difficult, and just what we lack up in numbers, we have to make up in planning.
A question from Bob to follow up to his original question. Have you ever caught a good guy like a real superhero?
I am a real superhero.
Have you ever caught a good guy?
No. No, I have never caught a guy.
Another question from Bob Areno. Have you ever tried a disguise?
I played a pirate at a Renaissance fair.
Uh, does anyone have questions about the campaign and about North Pacific?
Koopa, I love the Ren Fair. We have one down here. I know a bunch of people who work there. Sadly, it's about a 3 hour drive for me, so I can't make it as often as I want.
Um, Robespierre is the North Pacific #1 in the world. If yes, why? If no, what will you do to make it #1 in the world?
TMP is number one in my heart. Um, TMP, we are number one in our positive influence and our goodwill towards others.
Does anyone have more questions about campaign, the North Pacific, or anything political? Oh, HME writes, I don't know if you already talked about this, but in comparison to past delegates, like Mac Macedonia, number of WA endorsements the current delegate has is pretty low. Therefore, the power that TNP has in the WA is in decline. How would you maintain TNP's power on the world stage, especially with the new game changes coming up?
The numbers overall in World Assembly members is in decline. It's symptomatic of our gameplay, our overall game player decline. So on a proportional level, it's not as bad as it would first look. But maintaining our power on the world stage with the new game changes coming up is going to require a lot. It's going to require multiple delegates. It's going to require a focus on what we can present to the game. It's going to focus on being that draw for those who are looking into the game and looking for a new home.
Barbarino asks a math question. What is the square root of 169?
13.
Barbarino, the answer to your question is 13. Question from Paleth, the King of the North. Dreadton, you're in the North Pacific's moderation. Your opponent had a lot to say about admin policy as someone on the inside. Without disclosing info you can't, how do you feel about the state of administration and its responses to recent events? Does this need to be explored and changed in any way?
Mad Jack's response is a bit surprising considering he used to be a moderator on TMP Gen and he still is one on the roleplay side. There is some valid criticisms about the situation, but being a member of the TMP Guidelines Committee, a lot of the concerns that he has is being addressed by the very admin team along with several key citizens. And there is always room to improvement and there's always room for discussion. One of the things I noticed that was brought up by Majak was information sharing between regions. That's something both TMP Roleplay and TMP General already does. I've had personally several discussions with my counterparts in other regions about members. The passing along of information occurs. The key factor in that is reliability of the information. I've been passed information that's on the flimsiest things, and I'm worried a bit about that line of thought of getting the delegate involved into that as my opponent plans, because what's going to be the response if that information is bad or unreliable? But the guidelines that are coming out that are going to be hopefully in place soon are a stepping stone in addressing those concerns. And they're sorry, I lost y'all there. The guidelines coming out addressed a lot of the concerns that the community had or still has.
Okay, another question from Ghost. You and Mad Jack have both addressed the state of ministries, reviewing them and making changes due to poor performance. Do you think cutting ministries is on the agenda or a possible thing that needs to happen? Would you consider that a viable option, especially regarding the worst performers, radio and cards, or maybe comms?
I don't think we're at the point of cutting ministries. Uh, each ministry, every ministry has its low points and its high points. Radio, particularly, as having been the minister of radio, it's difficult to recruit people to. We need to be open to reabsorbing ministries into others. I don't think we're at that point there. In the future, I discussed a little bit about cards. With some of the changes coming out, cards might not be a long-term viable ministry. Radio, maybe not either. I'm still looking at the state of that. I won't. After this term, though, I think we'll be in a good place to make that final decision. Comms, I don't see any reason to cut comms. I just think there's some tweaking to do on publication schedules and what we should publicate when. Bringing in an occasional outside writer, I think, is going to help that also.
A question from Koopa about the North Pacific Army. How much are you willing to listen to the NPA General Staff on issues involving the NPA, or do you intend to rely solely on your Minister of Defense?
It's been my experience on the real world side that you can't rely on just one person's input. You got to listen to multiple stakeholders. If you just listen to, say, I'm lack of a better term, I went from middle management to lower upper management. If my boss just listened to me and didn't get input for, say, the people who actually are on boots on the ground or who've been in the industry for a while, then bad planning and bad decisions making. So to answer your question, you have to listen to multiple people in the MPA before you make drastic changes. That comes from everything from the PFC to the general staff to the MOD.
Koopa continues with this question. So are you more willing to listen to people from the Army at large, even officers possibly?
Yeah, I will. I mean, it's never been my management style to cut off the flow of information from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top. I still go out into my production lines now and talk to the people working the line, even though I haven't worked the line for 8 years. And the MPA, with the issues we're facing, you can't cut off that flow of information. Even with the ministries that we have on now, comms, radio, home affairs, foreign affairs, you have to listen to everybody. You can't just have that one point of information, that one point of focus. That being said, it is the minister's job to filter and make sure some of the key information gets to the higher levels at the most efficient time.
A fun question from Minister of Radio Gap from the grave. What is there about American society that makes baseball America's national pastime?
Besides the fact that it was invented in America and it's an excuse to sit on your butt, drink beer, and eat hot dogs.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Gap? Koopa. Koopa has a question about national pastime, and doesn't football do that too?
Football does that, but we like football because there's a winner and there's a loser. There's no ties.
Baseball. Robespierre says baseball. Do you have an opinion on that? Is good. He says baseball is good.
I can't play baseball. I can't. I lose focus when the baseball is heading towards me. I focus on that and I get afraid it's going to hit me. I could be shot at and that doesn't bother me because you can't see the bullet. But that baseball scares me. That being said, my brother was varsity baseball and his travel ball team, and he can pitch like you would not believe.
Um, Barbarino, he says football has ties in the NFL.
I am absolutely less afraid of getting shot than playing baseball.
Yes. So if anyone has any more questions about baseball, Dreadton is afraid of baseball. Ghost is typing something. He might have a question. Barbarino has a statement that likes to stare at grass. I believe we'll have a question here in a moment. Dreadton, what's the deal with your position on commendations? You said that you feel out of character behavior should be investigated before a commendation happens, but it isn't a in character thing. Do you believe or don't you that there is a separation between in character and out of character? And if something is discovered down the line as out of character stuff, can be hard to investigate at times. Isn't a repeal appropriate?
So my position on commendations that started back in the beginning of my nation state's life, and the decision that was made then, OOC behavior are a valid reason for a repeal, but we have it. But the WA has a tendency not to uniformly apply that. That is, I think, the main key behind my position on commendations. If we're going to take OOC behavior and use it as a reason to commend or repeal a commend, then we need to be willing to do that uniformly or investigate it before we do it.
Ghost is typing something, but Bob has asked a question. Do you believe that individual ants are intelligent?
Individual ants are intelligent? Yes. Ants can do some pretty crazy things. There's dumb ants, there's smart ants, like everything else.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Barbarino? Also, new people that joined, please, if you don't have access to the Agora text, write it in spam or anywhere, just ping me so I can see it. Ghost and Bob is writing something, so we should have something in a few seconds. Is Castonbia intelligent or is he a bot of the state?
He he is super intelligent and there's a lot of stuff I see from him in the executive that is rather impressive.
Doesn't make sense. We will have an entire episode about greatness of Casa Envia, but not right now. We have a question from Paleth. TSP, the South Pacific, is one of our oldest allies, but obviously we had a really rough time with them earlier this year. You seem to take this very hard or personally and post it on the NS forums. Do you think the South Pacific or some of our own citizens have a reason to be concerned about your foreign affairs as it relates to the South Pacific or the Defender sphere more generally? Have your views softened or evolved since then?
I did take that a little bit harder than I should have for a game. I am one of those people who believes if you're a friend, then you're a friend. TSP is one of our friends, and there's been times when they've pretended or acted in one way and then publicly came out and posted stuff about us or disagreements with us and refused to directly talk to us about it. And some personal stuff kind of reminded me of a personal situation. And so it did come out a little harsher than I should have done. Do I think that the TSP or our citizens should be concerned about my views on TSP and foreign affairs? No. I can separate my personal feelings from the good of the group, and I'm going to circle this back to your question on commend. As a delegate, I'm not representing myself. If you ever notice, I tend to not post when I'm in a leadership position within TMP on the forums because I know people sometimes see that as my personal post being the post of the government. I can compartmentalize that. So, as delegate, my focus is on the good of the region over sometimes even my personal opinions. So my position hasn't necessarily softened or evolved. We take everything day by day. I'm glad that we've sort of reconciled with TSP. I would like to see us continue rebuilding our relationship. But I tend to be pretty consistent on that.
We have another question from Koopa. Following up on that, do you think that the NPA or Pacific Army should lean more Raider, Defender, or try to remain independent in their operations?
I like the fact that we're independent. I don't want us to focus one side or the other, but work with our best interest. If our best interest is to defend a region, or if our best interest is to topple a region, then that's what we need to do, regardless of what category somebody's trying to compartmentalize us into. Sometimes raiding is necessary, sometimes defending is necessary, sometimes independence is necessary.
HME asks, if given a chance to amend the Constitution without interference, what would you change?
If given a chance to amend the Constitution without interference, what would you change? I don't see any real need to amend anything in the Constitution. The way our Constitution, well, the way our legal documents are codified, our Constitution describes the government, our Bill of Rights describes the protections for our citizens, and our legal code describes how everything interacts with everybody else. So our government structure is pretty stable, and the way it's structured within there works really well. So there's really nothing in there structurally wise that we really need to change. Now, on the legal code side, there's a few tweaks to some of the FOIA laws with the Security Council that, as Vice Delegate, I've noticed were an issue. I think there's probably more tweaks on the legal code that are needed than the Constitution.
A question from Sir Kesto. What role will chimp slash monkey mafiatopia will play in your government?
I have a set of symbols he can bang around with wearing a little top hat.
Hoopa asks, uh, I do ask that if we can get more campaign related TMP questions, but Hoopa does ask, who is this Sarcasto person?
Apparently he's running for vice delegate.
Hope that answers your question, Koopa. HAME is typing something. How confident are you about winning this election?
I go into everything with 100% confidence.
Does anyone have any more questions relating the North Pacific, Dreadton's campaign, or anything? I believe we should take a few more questions and then close on this. Fun question. What is your type of food? What is your favorite type of food? Mexican, Italian, etc.
I like Vietnamese, like traditional Vietnamese, not like commercial Vietnamese.
What is the airspeed of velocity of an iron-laden swallow?
No idea. I'm not a aerospace engineer.
Several people are currently typing, so we might get a few more questions and Barbarino was not happy with you not getting the reference. If, if elected, can I have your car? No, I can't legally drive.
My car has 276,000 miles on it. I doubt I can get it to you.
What is your opinion about this meme? And it's, if you can you play that video so you can give your honest opinion on it?
I'm afraid to watch the video because it might crash the Discord, so I'm going to pass on that question.
Okay, sorry about that, Bob, but your question has been passed. HME says and asks, what kind of leader do you think TNP deserves?
TNP deserves TNP deserves a prophet who can foresee what's coming and make the best decisions. That being said, we can't tell the future, so TNP needs an adaptable person who's willing to listen but still make decisions even if they're difficult.
Okay, last question from Bob, and that's it. What is your opinion about this meme? And since apparently questions have been mostly fun questions, we will end it at here. Do you have an opinion on it?
Could be better.
It could be better, Bob. So there we go. So I see this is the end of the question. So if you had a question and you didn't ask it, too bad. So do you have any
I
closing
will be
remarks?
available for a little bit in the Agora channel if you want to talk directly and keep this chat going.
Dreadton says he will be available to talk in the Agora for a little bit after this town hall. Do you have any other closing remarks? Anything you want to
Nope,
say
I
to the
think that's good. I really hope people take the time to read my campaign thread. Um, Regardless of the results, I still always want to hear people's opinions on the future of the region. So, no matter what the outcome is, drop me a line. My DMs are always open. I'm here all the time.
as as Dreadton said it, his DMs are always open. So thank you, Dreadton, for taking the time out of your day to have this town hall. Um, and thank you everyone for showing up. I believe this was a fun town hall. Lots of good questions. Lots of good questions.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you.